Hello and welcome to this ACIA Masterclass webinar CPD session on PowerPoint Prowess. My name's Helen Taylor and I will be your guide through PowerPoint for the next hour or so. We're going to build a PowerPoint presentation together so that I can demonstrate a lot of the functionality of PowerPoint. But firstly, on this mostly blank presentation, I just want to show you how you can set up your own template slides, and that's by using the Slide Master. So you need to be in the View tab as we are here, and here we are in the master views, and I'm going to select Slide Master to open this up. Now, firstly, if you ever go into the Slide Master, be aware that it will default to the top title slide, which can still impact on the slides below. If you want to make a full major across the board change, you need to move up to the top slide. So this is the master, if you like. Now, for example, then at the moment, I would end up with white slides with black text. So the first thing I'm going to do is have a illustrated background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a picture from this device, and here's an ACIA logo that I prepared earlier. And I'm going to break all the rules in the book by resizing it from the side drag bars just to make it fit the slide for the purpose of demonstration. And as you know, if you select any object, you'll often get new tabs at the top. And here's my picture format tab, just to allow me to change the transparency a little bit. What you'll notice if you have a look in the sidebar down the side is that every single one of these, what they call slide layouts, has taken that background. Any new slide I now create will have that background. I can also change other content within these slides. Anytime you see these dotted lines, these are called placeholders. And you'll notice, because I'm in the Slide Master, I have various options within there to do things like insert placeholders. These will show in an outline view, whereas content that you just put on a slide will not show. Also, you can, if you're anything like me and you don't really use any of these templates and you're a blank slide person like I am, you can get rid of the ones you don't need. So for example, here, I am never going to do a slide that has anything writing this way. This might come in handy, I suppose, if I was doing a document type version of PowerPoint and I wanted a nice sidebar, but I've got no use for that slide. So I can, if I want, I can delete. Okay, so you can make as many changes as you like to your slide master. And if I close this master view now, all my slides have now got that background. So you play with that to your heart's content. What you will have noticed, though, is that you have also got a handout master where you can change your handouts, and you have also got a notes master where you can change your notes page to however you like it. So it doesn't have to be a default of the slide being that size at the top and the text box being that size at the bottom. Okay, now whilst I remember, then let's just have a quick look at the other view options that you've got for your actual slides before we move on and start building a PowerPoint presentation together. Okay, so firstly, normal view, which is what you normally see when you first come online. And what you get here is you get your slide, which you can obviously work on and edit. Okay, and then underneath you can see your notes page, and you can do a little bit of resizing of these different windows and panes so that you can get a bit more into the on screen if you need to. You can also do the same thing with your left hand pane as well if you really don't need to see the slides that big, and you can pick your slides up and reorder them if you like in that area. Now you'll notice here that there is a slide title for these slides which does not show on the slide itself. These are called hidden slide titles, and I will show you how those work a little later on. But if you have slide titles in a placeholder or content in a placeholder, for example here, because this was one of those template title slides, when you look at your outline view, you get a textual version which again is selectable, so you can jump to the slides, which will show anything that's in a placeholder. So this placeholder will show in the outline as it does there. The titles also show. However, you will notice that this text box is not showing because that's something I added later on. Okay, so that's your outline view. Now, slide sorter so does what it says on the box. If you've got a lot of slides, this might be a more useful way of trying to drag it about then on the vertical sidebar. Notes pages. As you will know from notes pages, you can't do any editing of the picture of the slide, or you can resize it, and your text goes below. And again, we saw how now you could change that in your notes page master to be whatever you want it to be. If I scroll down to the next slide, one of these slides I do believe had some text. No, I redrew this for the purposes of training, so it doesn't. So let me just put some random text in, about as random as you can get. Okay. And we'll fill some of this in. Right, so imagine you had some content here. Now, at the point where this text box ends is exactly where the page break would be. So as you can see at the moment, it'll be straight through those A's. You can, on a notes page by notes page basis, if you want, resize that text box to as far as it will go down the page to squeeze that bit of extra text in, or to force a page break where you like it. What I would mention is that whilst you're in that text box in notes pages, and you can set the font, you can set these formats within the normal view as well. You might not necessarily see them, but I can do all the usual sort of stuff that I might want to do with my formatting. However, once I move outside the confines of that text box, so once it forces the page break, it's all going to be just grayscale and black and white, I'm afraid, folks. You lose your formatting options. But the break is literally where that line will be. So if I let the break be there, it would start right at the top of the next page of my text. So I just thought I would mention that when I was talking about the different views. Okay, and then reading view. So the best way to demonstrate reading view for you is I'm firstly going to go back to normal view, and we go back to the top of our presentation. Before we hit reading view, I'm just going to select a new window. Now, what new window does, and it exists in all the Office packages, is it basically it helps you see double, if you like, because what will happen when I click it, you'll notice it's called Presentation 4. I've now got 2 instances of Presentation 4. What I can do then is I can shrink one of them down. And once it will let me pick it up, sometimes it's a little bit awkward about that. There we go. I'm going to take it to the right hand side, and because I have taken that to the right hand side, it says, well, what do you want on the left hand side? And I'm going to say, yeah, I'll have exactly the same thing, please. Now these are exactly the same thing. As a demonstration, if I change this to on the right, you can see it instantly changes on the left. But that's all very well and good. What I might want to know is, what does it look like as a PowerPoint presentation whilst I'm changing it? So on this side, doesn't matter which, I'm going to change this to reading view, and now I can actually see it in action. So if I had any animation going on, I could actually see that happening as I changed it. And that's what the reading view is for. It's so you can watch your presentation without actually having to be in your presentation and come in and out of it every time, which, to be fair, can be a bit of a pain. So because it's exactly the same thing, all I have to do when I finished is just close one of them down and then resize the other one. So just bear with me while I escape out of that and resize it. It's often hard to get hold of when I'm in presenting mode. There we go. Right, and so we're back in the room, and that's what the reading view is all about. Okay, so let's move on then, and let's start building a PowerPoint presentation ourselves. So I've got something to show you, which is called creating a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to actually present this to you. I'm going to launch it using the start from this slide. Notice Shift and F5 is also a good shortcut for starting a presentation. Okay, so getting started with Helen Taylor. We're going to touch on text and we're going to touch on contrast. What we're also going to talk about is a thing called a transition, and that's how one slide moves to another. And then we're going to build this slide together, which is things to consider. So hopefully by the time we built this, we'll have talked briefly about the message on your slide. We'll talk about text, as I said. We'll talk about size of graphics and text. We'll talk about contrast. Hopefully we've got good contrast going on here between the foreground and the background, because it's really important for accessibility. And then we're going to talk about adding objects and graphics to your slides and working with those. And you'll notice that that object came on at the same time as the word object. So we'll talk about how you do that. And then we're also going to talk about the most important thing that everybody wants to know about. We're going to talk about animation, and we're going to talk about additional animation, and we're going to talk about even more additional animation. Okay. So what we're also going to look at then is working effectively with the graphics on the same slide or a different slide. And one thing I will mention now is that gone are the days when you had to try to keep as few slides as possible. Now, yes, keep as few slides as possible because you don't want your audience dozing off, but the memory is no longer a massive issue. So you make as many slides as you need to be effective. Sometimes I might have 2 slides where I might have done the animation on 1 slide because I need it to print out that way for my notes page, for example. But what I'll show you in terms of spacing and sizing and locating objects on your slide is how people won't be able to tell it's a new slide because everything's in exactly the same place. Okay. So alongside that, then what we will also look at is how you can deal with images and some top tips on images, another transition of which I'm a big fan, and then that circle there with nobody in it at the moment, that's called a cameo, and right at the end I will appear in my own PowerPoint presentation so you can briefly see what I look like before we finish, and then we'll just touch briefly on animating word outs as well. And hopefully between us then you will have learned a lot more about how to work PowerPoint. Okay folks, so I'm going to come out of this PowerPoint, press escape, back in the room, and I'm going to move to our new blank PowerPoint slides. Okay, now the first thing I'm going to do is set up that template. So I'm going to go into View, I'm going to go into Slide Master, and notice again it's not at the top, it's decided to be on the slide that I was in, which is fine. I'm going to go right up to the top because I want all of my slides to be black. And because I want all the content as much as possible to be yellow by default, I'm also going to change everything I possibly can to yellow on this top bar, and you'll notice that the yellow has now followed through. If you look carefully on the right hand side, folks, there are all these different templates, yeah, all these different what they're called slide layouts. Everything that's in a placeholder is yellow. I know that anything that's not in a placeholder I will have to change probably myself. That's life, that's PowerPoint for you. Okay, so pop into the slide master, close my master view, and I'm back in the room. I have a blank slide ready to go. Okay, I'll just resize this back down a little bit so we can see most of our slide. Right, so this is a title slide, or should be. Just to be on the safe side, I'm going to do an insert new slide, title slide. There we go. And I'll delete whatever that was in case it wasn't one. Right, so I'm going to add getting started with PowerPoint. Now, you must make sure you capital P both words, otherwise you'll be in trouble with Microsoft. Now, we know obviously that you can format text using the usual font options in Home. I will just mention though a quick shortcut which I think is very useful. If I select this text and hold down Control and Shift and then my less than sign, it will shrink the text, and if I then hold down Control and Shift instead and use the greater than sign, it will increase. So this works in Word as well. I find it really, really useful if all I want to do is just make my writing a bit bigger, a bit smaller. Okay. Oops. Now, I actually want it to be, because I have little notes here telling me, I want it to be 60 points. Now, again, 60 point is in the drop-down options, but if I want it to be 41 point, I can type in these boxes, and again, it's across the system. Don't feel you're stuck with the ones that are in the options, but I only want 60, so I will accept the ones that are in the options. And then here, my subtitle was with Helen Taylor, and I need this to be Arial 36. So again, if you watch as I do the Control Shift increase, you'll see the size increase at the top, and there we go. And just for proof of the point, because these were placeholders, if I very quickly change to the outline view here, you'll see that my title and my subtitle are in there because they were placeholders. Okay, back to the normal view. Now, I'm going to insert a new slide layout, and I want a blank one. So I don't have any blank ones on screen at the moment. So I'm just going to go insert new slide blank. Now, you did notice that we had more than 2 slides. We had a few more. If I now select that blank slide and do a Control M, it will give me another blank slide directly underneath. Okay. If I do it again, watch where it appears. Directly underneath, not at the bottom of everything. If I do that with the title slide, Control M, it gives me another title slide, okay, which I don't need. I'm going to get rid of that. Okay, so basically it will give you the next design that you selected. Okay, that's probably enough slides actually. I think I need those, so that's quite handy. Okay, Control and M, new slide of the type that you've selected or the next template. You only get one of this type, you see, which is why it gave me a slightly different template. Okay, so next thing I need to do then is I need to introduce that list of things and a title. So I'm going to put my title on first. Okay, so I'm going to insert text. I'm going to insert a text box. And first thing I'm going to do is just type the word. So it's things to consider. Notice how this is white. So I will have to at some point make it yellow. In fact, we might as well do that now. So I'm going to do that the same old way as I did it before. And just need to check what size I needed this to be. Arial 44 bold, lovely. Right, so I do believe I could just pick that from there, which is lovely. Now, what I am going to do is I am actually going to resize this title slide all the way across and centralize it. Now, you know, you can leave your text boxes the size that they were to fit the text. The reason that I've done that though, however, and fitted it across is because then any sort of title I might want to use, I can just copy and paste onto the next slide and it'll be in exactly the same place. If I copy this now and take it next door and paste, it's in exactly the same place. I just change the content and I know my titles are in exactly the same place without messing around with positioning, which I'll show you in a bit. I don't need that there, so I'll delete it for now. Now, the reason I put the title at the bottom is because I watched a video a while back when I was doing presentation skills and PowerPoint skills, and it said, and I thought it was really valid, how often is the title of your slide the most important thing that is on your slide? It's not, is it? It's your message, it's your content. Yeah, it's your brief bullet points or your image, and that's what matters. The title's just, you know, a nice to have. It's not a need to have. So I put my titles at the bottom now. Okay. I'm going to insert another text box because now, and bear with me while I type all these folks, remember we had all those different things that we were going to talk about. So I'm just going to type these things in. So message, text, size. Once somebody watches you typing, you forget how to type. Objects and animation. Okay, now, as I move this around, can you see it's a little hard against the black background, but can you see that there's little red indicators? There they are. There's a vertical one there, and if I move it down a little bit, there's a horizontal one, so it's a bit easier to see. And at the moment I've got both. If I let go now, that's dead center, and what you will find is you do get these alignment lines that help you sort of line things up with either you know, the whole slide or bits on the slide. I think I'm going to go for dead center, but possibly slightly higher up than horizontal dead center. And again, I need these to be a lot bigger. Obviously, I can select on this. I can select this shape, and I've got a shape format tab at the top, so I can do things like fill the shape itself. But don't forget that's the box. So if I dear, you can't read that, can you, at all? Because I filled in that box in white. But I do also have the word art styles, and I can change the fonts in the usual way. So I'm just going to change the fonts in the usual way. And I do believe, again, they were 44 and they were yellow. And obviously now it's not fitting in at all. So I'm going to pick it up slightly and just make sure it's as happy as I am central on the page. There we go. Right. So just before we do the animation then, I'm going to bring in that image of the thinking person. And that enables me to just briefly talk about objects. Obviously, you already saw us bring in the from the picture from your device. Brand images is very, very new. That surprised me the other day. But apparently this is search and insert images from your organization's image library. So I'm going to go and have a play with that later. But we've also got stock images and online pictures. Now, online pictures, if you pick that and you're Office 365, basically Bing will allow you to search for images and it will bring back default Creative Commons, where generally speaking, you know, for non-profit making purposes, like most of us in the law enforcement world, it would be fine to use. Also, the stock images that are provided to us through Microsoft are completely free and license free for us to use in whatever we want. So perfect in a training world when they're very conscious of things like licenses and copyright, as we all should be. So if we go to stock images, yes, you've got all these brilliant photographs. It makes lovely slide backgrounds, etc., etc. And you can search. So I can search for puppy, which I'll need later, for example. Okay, there he is. However, what you can also do is things like cut out people. There's no puppies in the cut out people. And these are all different folks where you can take them and they're transparent backgrounds. So They will just show up on whatever you're inserting them into. And you can pick actually, if you want Marcy or Deepika to appear throughout your presentation, you can just have those. There's a variety of other things you can have as well. What I'm going to select, I want an icon. And no, Deepika's not an icon, but thinking is. And I do believe that that is the one I am searching for. I'm going to insert that. Now, you'll notice that basically at the moment, all I seem to have is a black box. And that's because, one, the icons are all square, so I get a square icon. Secondly, it was a black outline on a white background. So inevitably, on the black background, I see nothing. So graphics format. Now, this is a graphic, not text. I need to fill it in yellow. And just in the off chance, make sure its outline is yellow to make it as thick as possible. Because it's a graphic, I get the graphic tab as we know, and I've got options to resize up here using the height and the width. However, what I can do is I can right click this object and say format graphic. What that will do, as in right clicking anything and saying you want to format it, will always do this. It will bring up a sidebar, if you like, with all the different formatting options for the item that you have chosen. If I then moved off and told it to do it for another, it would just change the sidebar to the one that I was working on. So I'm working on a graphic. I've still got the fill options and the line options. I've also got things like the reflections and the shadows and all the effects. Just for demonstration purposes, we'll give it a very, very quick reflection. There it is. And we will undo that. But what it also then has is the size and the position. Now, a couple of things to mention. At the moment, this lock aspect ratio is ticked, which means if I manually change the size to what I want it to be, which is 10 centimeters, okay, everything will be proportionate to what it originally was. And it shows the same at the top as well, but you can't see that lock aspect ratio. So if you want to make sure everything always stays undistorted, make sure you've got a tick in lock aspect ratio. Also, if you're manually resizing, I recommend dragging by the corner pieces rather than the side radials, because that will also help keep your item proportionate. Now, I can force the issue if I drag one of these, yeah, but now I then start resizing, it will take that forced issue, as it were, and it will now proportionally resize it to the funny shaped graphic I now have. So you can overrule it. I'm not going to. Okay, but alongside size then, now we've looked at playing with size, there is also position. And what position will give you is, it will give you basically a horizontal position across the slide and a vertical position down the slide. And I know that if I type this in, I'm looking at my positions, it should be 21 centimeters here. And just because of the way the slide originally got written, it's very specific on a 4.44. Have you noticed that that's moved? Okay, and that will become relevant when I show you the blue thinking person later on this presentation. Okay, so that's how you can put something exactly in the same place each time by using that position options. Okay, you'll notice because I clicked off, I'm now on format background. If I click back onto the graphic, I'm back into the graphics options. Okay, if I click onto this text box, I'm now on the shape because the text box is a shape. If I click onto this one, I'm on a different shape. So you can see how that side pane will stay available to you whenever you need it to. Okay, brilliant. So we're ready to do some animation. Okay, I'm going to select the animation tab, and you'll notice because I have nothing whatsoever selected, the only option I have is to turn on the animation pane. And I think the animation pane is very, very valuable unless you're doing unbelievably simple animation. So I am going to turn that on. It is a different type of pane to the formatting pane. Okay, now, once I select something that I might want to animate, then, here we go. What will happen is now the animation functionality becomes available. My advice to you when you're thinking about animation is you need to think about four things. You need to think about how is it going to, for want of a better description, appear or come onto the slide. Then you need to think about, right, okay, so it is now present. Is it going to have any sort of emphasis or effect to sort of like makes it stand out? Then you need to think about, okay, it's done its thing. Now it's done its thing. Should it change color? Should it disappear? Is there anything I want it to do? Now I've talked about that point. And then finally, is it going to make some sort of grand exit? Okay, so how it gets on, what it does whilst it's there, what it does when you finish talking about it, if you like, and then is it going to leave? And also think about what you might want to work at the same time and how long you think things should take. So there are quite a few things you have to think about. Right, so if you remember, these items, basically, their text wiped onto the screen, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to select this drop down arrow beside the animations, and you'll see that what you have is the entrance. How is it going to come onto the slide? And there's 13 common options there. You've got the emphases. What does it do when it's on the slide, which tend to be amber unless there's some sort of like multicolor effect going on. And then your exits, and they show red, and you will see when they start appearing in the animation pane, they follow that color coding so you can see what's going on. You also have different motion paths, so if you have things flying in and doing fancy things, that's very much more advanced animation, but the options are there. You'll notice though, however, that it just say more. And if I show you just the more entrance effects, there's a lot more than those 13, many of which it thinks are exciting, and some are moderate, and some are basic. One tip I do have is, unless you're confident that your audience is going to have exactly the same software as you might want to stick mostly with the basic animations, which are still good effects, because I speak from personal experience of having an all singing, all dancing, what I thought was an awesomely animated PowerPoint, and none of it worked because their version was about 3 versions older. So do bear that in mind. Okay. So I'm just going to cancel that for now. I will mention that preview effect, basically it will just show what the animation is going to do when you pick it. And I think that's a worthwhile thing to keep ticked, unless it gets on your nerves. So I am going to tell this text box, which I have selected, that I want it to wipe. And wipes in the top 13 anyway. So it instantly, because I had preview, it previewed it and it gave it a number. And because it's currently selected, both on the screen and therefore in the animation pane, it's got that color coding. If I click off, the animation stays, the number stays, so it knows what is number 1, but the selection color coding has gone. I'm going to reselect it because I don't want it to wipe upwards. I want it to wipe from the side. The effect options does not have that many things available on the tab until you select the drop down beneath it and get the full effect options. But what it does have, if I just hit the main section, is it says, right, it gives me a direction and it gives me a sequence. So the direction is pretty straightforward. I want it to come from the left. And what it means by the sequence is, okay, do I want everything to appear at the moment like it is doing, yeah, as one object, all at once, or by paragraph? So think about the text. And I know it's only words, but they are basically paragraphs. So now it's saying, okay, well, in this case, they're going to come on one at a time. Have you noticed how they're all now numbered one at a time? And if I hit this little drop down chevron in the animation pane, they're also one at a time. Okay, so I've thought about how it's coming on. It's going to wipe. They're going to come on one at a time. Now, at the moment, I can tell by looking in the top tab and picking on these as well, that they are going to start on a click. So I have to press my mouse or my slide clicker if I'm using a slide clicker, or press page down. Each one is going to take half a second to actually do its thing. In this case, it's wiping, and nothing's been delayed. Okay. Now, if you remember, animation took a bit longer to come onto the screen in our demonstration. So I'm going to select animation, and I can select it from any point, either the number, okay, by selecting it like that, selecting the text, or by clicking on the animation number in the animation pane, which I find is less fiddly. And I'm going to actually tell that I want it to take 2 seconds. Watch what happens to the green bar. It gets longer. So you do actually see a visualization as you have in the animation pane as to what happens. You can also start your animation from part way through. So I could just start it from size. So if you want to test something out, you don't have to watch the whole thing, which is also quite useful. And if you saw there was a stop button, it's not a long enough thing to justify stopping. Lovely. So we now know that the animation takes longer. Now, if you remember rightly, what also happened was that as they came on, everything, when it had finished coming on, went grey. Now, that's actually, although it was a colour change, it's called dimming. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select all of these. So the concept of the control and the shift and those types of things all still work. So I'm going to select all of these with a quick click and shift. And that's so that now when I do the right click and tell it I want the effect options, so this is the same menu as if you clicked this little arrow here. Here's my effect. So it knows it's doing a wipe from the left because I chose that. I could have made it go bing or something every time a thing came on. I'm not having any sound. This is where I'm telling it what to do by the text. This is interesting. If you tell it to animate it by letter, you can make it look like it's typing, which is quite fun. But we won't do that now. But what I want them all to do is I do want them to dim to grey. Okay, so it's called a dim even though it's a colour change. Okay, now because I'm okaying that and it's a material change, it previews it for me. There we go, and that's what it's going to do. What I could do though, and just to demonstrate this, is at the moment, so this is click my mouse, click, 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 click. I could decide that I actually want the word text to come on with the previous item instead. And then if I play it from message, you'll see that message and text come on together. Or I could tell text to come on automatically after the previous item, but we'll make it 3 seconds. Hopefully it'll be long enough for you to notice this happen. Now, believe that I am not clicking my mouse at this point, okay? Because obviously it's a demonstration. So if I play it now, oops, I did message instead. Never mind, that's fine. It actually came on after the one underneath. You get the idea. I'm going to put that, I am definitely going to remove that delay, otherwise nothing else is going to work. But it just goes to show how you can tweak your timings as much as you like. Just need to get that to take. There we go. Right, so we're back in the room. Now, that's all very well and good. What we also had then is we had some of the text leaving and coming back in. So how do I make contrast leave when at the moment contrast is basically wiping on? The mistake, and I do it myself on a regular basis, the mistake people make is what they try to do is basically just select it and do an animation from up here. That will not work because it will overwrite the one you've already got. If I want to animate it again, what I have to do is select it. Okay, so on this occasion, I'm going to select it actually from the slide, but it doesn't really matter. But just to be on the safe side, I decided to select it from there, and I am going to add an animation because it's going to get another one. Okay, so just to demonstrate actually, what I will do is I will give it an emphasis and I'll give it a theta. Okay, now have you noticed that theta as a contrast option is orange, as I said, not amber, and it's underneath because it's the most recent thing. However, if I want it to happen straight after contrast appears on the screen, I can move it in the pane. And now if I just start from size, contrast does its thing and then it moves on. It still does its change of color, okay? But if you remember, and I'm sure you do, contrast also bounced out. So I'm making sure that I select the 4 for contrast, okay? And I'm telling us again that I want to add an animation. And this time I'm having an exit, which is bounce. Now, you've noticed that what's happened is everything's bounced out. Okay, it's not the end of the world. It's just because of the way it works. I can then go into all these different animations and I can remove the ones I don't want. And of course, it decided it wasn't going to have that. So let me see if it will do it one by one. There we go. Didn't like it at the top. So if I just remove objects, because all I want to animate, remove size, remove text, remove message animation. There we go. So now, if I play that from the top, out goes contrast. Okay, it's a little bit faster than that animation, which is why they happen at the same time, but it is bouncing out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move animation down one, as you see, and I'm going to add one last animation to contrast. So again, I'm going to select that. I'm going to add one more animation because I want it to come back. And I want it to fly in from the top left. That's very fast, but you get the idea. And again, it's done the whole text box, but it's not the end of the world. Oops. I've shrunk all my chevrons by accident. Let's try that again. Contrast, add animation, fly in. There we go. And then effect options, from the top left. You see I've got slightly more options there. Lovely. Okay, so now if I play that through, I'm going to put text back to on the click as if I was actually presenting. Notice how the numbers change, yeah? Okay, now objects comes on and then contrast flies out as objects comes on. I actually think I want that to happen. I can use these arrows up here after animation comes on. Okay, so if I play this now, hopefully our animation, a bit of a wobble there, off it goes, there we are, and then it comes back in. Now, what I'm also going to do is I am going to animate this image. Okay, we'll have a fade. I like a fade. Make it a little bit slower, that fade. Okay, so you notice that the graphic has now appeared. Okay, and what I want this to do is I want it to come on at the same time as the word objects. So I'm moving it up to where objects is, and I'm telling it to appear with the previous. And if I play that from the beginning, okay, works lovely. Right, okay, so I've animated now the object and the text box. Okay, I want to show you how you can work with your images and why I went to all that trouble to put in this item in exactly the same place. So I'm going to select our thinking person and I'm going to copy and paste straight on top. Now I love this. Whenever you paste straight on top, it doesn't paste it straight on top. It pastes it slightly off center, which is quite annoying. I'm going to close the animation pane down for now. And this new object, I'm going to graphics format it because I'm going to make this one a nice cyan blue fill and a nice cyan blue outline. And there we are. So firstly, that would make it a lot easier to line up. Okay. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it, do the size and position. And if you remember from before, I had those positions set. So I'll pop down to position and it was 21. Don't expect you to remember the numbers, obviously, but it was 4.44. Now, those are literally on top of each other. Now, imagine if I wanted to animate one but not the other, and it's quite hard to actually see what's going on. Okay. There's one more thing that you can use, which exists, again, across the packages, and that is the selection pane. So it's actually interesting in the editing tab, in the home tab, and under this select there's a selection pane. Again, it's a different thing to the animation pane, so if I wanted I can also have the animation turned on and I can toggle between them. Okay, so on any slide, if you're in the selection pane, okay, what it will tell you is what you've got on the slide, and you can hide things or show things. So for example, if I hit this little thing, it's meant to be an eye, it's hiding the things to consider. If I ran the PowerPoint, that would not show either. But what it does mean is I can figure out which is graphic. So graphic 5 is the blue one, yeah, and graphic 4 is the yellow one, which you can't see happening at the moment, but if I turn that one off, then make that one disappear. Okay, but because I'm in the selection pane, I can be a bit canny here. What I can do is I can go into where it says graphic 4 and double click and say yellow thinker. Okay, press enter and double click on this one here and say blue thinker and enter. And what you'll notice now, if I switch back to the animation pane, is I can spot them and know what's going on with the animation as well. So the selection pane is really handy because you can change things. So actually, I don't know what text box 1 is. Well, I do now, don't I? It's the title. So I can call that if I want things to consider. There we go. And now I know the difference between all the things. But the point behind this is what I can do is I can make sure that my yellow thinker is off so that when I select just the blue thinker, I know that the animation that I'm giving it, which was to dissolve. So I think I have to go to the more entrance effects there for dissolving in. Okay. And that can be the last animation. Make sure it is. And it is. Make it. I think dissolve tape needs to be a little bit longer, so we'll give it an hour and a half. We'll give it a minute and a half, and that should now be our full slide animated. So again, we go back to the beginning. We don't have to play it all as a live presentation yet, and we'll just check it's all going to work. There we go. bit of a wobble, off it goes, in it comes back, and now you see my yellow one did not show up because my yellow thinker is still turned off. So if I now turn that back on and go back, let's just say from contrast, let's not go mad, and just play it from there. There's contrast, there's objects. There we go. You'll notice that because these weren't animated, they did not go grey, in case you were wondering. Okay, right. Now, let's talk transitions. I'm going to close these pens down for now. So transitions have their own tab, and I'm going to go back to our title slide. So these are all the different transitions that you can choose. And as I said, these are basically how slides move from one to another. So what you actually need to think about is your landing slide. So this slide here is our landing slide. So the transition will take place from the title to the landing. And my transition is going to be a peel off. Okay. And again, you can make it take a little bit longer, and you have some options. So I can actually make it peel off from the right if I wanted to. I am a fan of fracture. I do think that's quite fun, but for the purposes of this, it's going to be a peel off. Taking a little bit longer, maybe 2 seconds to take. Okay, again, you can even have a sound if you want an introductory sound to that. And the points about transitions then is that the slide will then change in that way. Okay. Again, be careful of versions of PowerPoint. So I've added a peel off transition to slide 2. And now slide 3, we had a picture. So I'm going to insert from the stock image that picture of the puppy. There they are. Okay. Now, what we'll mention is sometimes you might want to resize and it has to go outside the confines. Particularly if you're not doing any printing out or anything like that, or notes pages, do not worry if it goes beyond the confines of the slide. It's not going to be the end of the world, and it might look more sensible when you're resizing it. For the purposes of this, I am going to resize it. Now, often if you have not changed any of your settings in PowerPoint and you put a graphic in, you'll get like design ideas. You can actually in the options tell it to turn that off. That's why I'm not getting nagged with suggestions for how I'd like to use my puppy. Okay, now this is a graphic picture, so I get a picture format options. I can do things that I want to do up here, like we did the transparency. And I'm not going to make it transparent because I've got a black background. It would look a bit strange, but I am going to turn it into a chalk sketch, which is quite nice. Okay, and again, I'm going to add a very quick animation that I don't even need to, I don't need the animation pane for this. I'm literally going to have it dissolve in at a reasonable speed. Whoops, okay, all right, I'll just change that to be a little longer. Okay. So what I would mention though, and this is probably too complex a picture to work effectively, but we'll see what it does. Whenever you've got a picture, you have this option called remove background. And what will happen, yes, it's not particularly letting me do it. It does it itself here. But if you've got something a bit more simple, what it will do is it will identify in pink things that you could delete. And then you could choose them, or you can mark other areas. This is obviously too complex a picture, which is fine. But I could keep changes, and that would just take, in this case, the puppy without the background. I'm quite impressed with that, to be fair, but it's not what I wanted. But just to let you know that that option is there. So you can turn a picture into something that's a bit more see-through. Have a look at our Word webinar if you'd like to know more about removing the background of a picture. However, what I am going to do, now I'm happy with my picture, is I'm going to... You could not make that up, folks. Did you just see that my computer's about to restart while I'm in the middle of a live presentation and the snooze button doesn't work? Anyway, right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this picture of a puppy and I'm going to go to my next slide, paste it in. Interestingly, that picture did not copy. I got my man instead. So let me try again. Copy. There we go. Okay. Obviously, if I was doing this as a proper full PowerPoint presentation, I would also put the alt text on for those using the accessibility reader. More of that shortly. But what I've done is I've copied and pasted the picture and I've resized it to a third of the slide. Okay, and the reason is because just before I finish, I'm going to show you one more transition. What I'm also going to pop onto this slide before we finish, though, is I'm going to insert a cameo. Okay, so basically, a cameo, you can be in your own PowerPoint slides. So you get to pick a shape. Okay, I've turned the preview off for now. I'm going to go in a circle, but you can have a different shape on every slide if you want. I'm going to pop me up here. Okay, and I can have all sorts of effects as well if I want. Yeah, like a shadow and a border and stuff like that. Let's put myself in a nice big, so you can see it. Nice thick border. Okay, right. So I will show you more of that shortly. And I could also pop some word art in on here just to show you how to use word art. So text is word art. Okay, you get default settings like this. So I'll pick something basic, maybe in this white text here. And then I do believe I put and repeat. And I'm going to just change this font here to be quite large. I'm going to make it 72 in bold. Now, that's all very well. Don't forget, this is a shape. It's a word art shape. If I go into the shape format and look in the word art styles, this is probably the bit you're most interested in, which is your text effects. So you get a variety of shadows and all that sort of stuff. So let's have a glow. We'll give it a bit of a, since it's white text, maybe a pink glow. No, it doesn't stand out that brilliantly. I've done some reading about the reasons behind this. It's all to do with the contrast between the glow and the black background. It's not the best thing to have. So perhaps a bevel might work a bit better. Oh, that's a bit interesting. Let's have a bevel. There we go. That one looks quite good. But the one you're surely most interested in is your transformations, where you can have all these different word art shapes. So I do believe that mine says I want the rather interestingly called inflate bottom. Which is that's inflate top. Do you believe that's deflate bottom? That must be inflate bottom. There we go. But again, you have all those different options that you have. That was just to bring something on. Of course, you see if it's the background shape, you're going to shape the background. If I want to select that, I need to tell it that I want to change the text, and that is going to be in the text fill, not the shape fill. There we go. And it seems to do it sometimes a word at a time, which you will get used to. Lovely. And I'm going to animate that to basically just, what did I do with that one actually? It's a really good question. Zoom out. Okay, so it's interesting. Its entrance is to zoom out. Be there somewhere. Zoom. Okay, effect options. Zoom out from the slide center. There we go. Right. Okay, folks, so I have one last thing to add, and that is a transition to this slide. And this is one I learned about most recently, and that is one called Morph. And basically what you have to do is you have to copy your picture from one slide to the other. Okay, let's see if it will now cooperate. And what it should do is it should basically animate that puppy image to shrink down to the top left-hand corner as part of the transition. So let's see how much of this PowerPoint is actually going to work in one go and whether my slide transition worked. So I am going to go to the start of this PowerPoint. I'm going to turn my slide on, as my camera on as well. Oh, do bear in mind that if you're presenting and you want to be on Cameo, on Teams at the moment, you can't do both. So it's either you can be seen as yourself on Teams, or you can be seen in the Cameo, not both. Okay, I'm going to run this presentation now. Let's see what we have. So we got the getting started with Helen Taylor. We move it on and we get the slide transition. We get the things to consider. We get the words turning grey as they come on in decent contrast. That was an emphasis. The object comes on with the object. Off goes contrast. Animation finally comes on. Back comes contrast. Okay, and then the yellow thinking person becomes the blue thinking person. Straightforward transition just to show you how you can bring an image on. Don't forget to always resize them using the corners. And then is my morph going to work? That's me, hello. And typically my morph didn't work, but there you go. That is life. Okay, and there's the word out to finish. I am not going to re-record this whole PowerPoint just because my morph didn't work. It is actually, there we go, it's about to restart again. It's really nagging me now, so I better tell you the last few things. Okay, folks, so the last thing I do want to talk about very, very briefly is when you think you've finished your lovely presentation, what you should do is you could go into review and you should have a look at check accessibility. Okay, you will get the accessibility assistant, which will look at, now you can either do it for the current slide at a time, or you can do it for everything. So mine's actually for everything. But what it will tell you if it's find anything that it can't read. It's saying my contrast is fine. It's saying I've got missing alt text, so I really ought to put a label on that picture. It's saying it's got no problems with tables. It says I've got missing slide titles, which I do. So I'm going to go to the first slide title. I know I don't have one because I've opened the accessibility assistant. You'll see up here I've also now got the accessibility tab, and I can add a slide title to this. Now if I do add slide title here, it will put it on the slide, but I can add a hidden slide title and call it slide 2. Yeah, notice it's defaulting to yellow. Doesn't matter. It's not even going to be seen. It's for the reading purposes and for the pane. Okay, so it'll be happy. I mean, I might change it to black just for the tidiness and so I can spot it. And it's not going to show on the slide. Not an issue. But if I quickly change to view, you'll see that it is now in the outline view. You get the idea. Okay, so I have to sort out missing right. And then the other thing it wants me to do is check the reading order. So I am going to stay on this slide and I'm going to say check the reading order. Now, what happens with reading order is people will sometimes, if they've got a visual impairment, they might want the slides to be read out to them. And I've just clicked that check the object order because basically it says, right, so if I'm going to read it out, firstly, I'm going to read out things to consider. Then I'm going to read out the contents of the text box. Then I'm going to try to describe this, etc. I can say to it, don't even read those out. They're just graphics. They're not important. Yeah. And I actually want it to read the, I don't want it to read the title, or I might want it to read the title. I might actually, to be fair, want it to read the title first and then read the things to consider and then read the text box. You get the idea, yeah? So the reading order is very important if you think anybody might want to actually listen to your PowerPoint, yeah? And so once you have done that, finished that, and everything's basically got a red tick, you know that your PowerPoint presentation is fully accessible. Okay, as best as you can make it. Mine wasn't doing too badly apart from those missing slides. Okay, everybody, so thank you very much for watching this PowerPoint presentation. You're always welcome to get in touch. I am helen.taylor@westyorkshire.police.uk. And please do check out some of our other webinars and we will see you online again soon. I am now going to stop the recording.